Hello and welcome. This channel created to explain some common features and dynamics of the narcissistic personality disorder and engagement or relationships between narcissistic and empathic individuals. This time I focus more on the emphatic nature, and some signatures of more advanced empathic personality traits and characteristics. I see lots of misconceptions about this personality type, and many, if not most people who are not an empath misunderstand the nature. Empath, well known to have ability to feel what others feel and very sensitive to their environment. Consequently to the type of energies they interact with. It's indeed true. To be more specific, empaths are much more tuned to negative energies than to the positive ones. This is because the positive energy is harmless to them. In case of the ones who more evolved empaths, the positive energy doesn't require much attention as their emotional state mostly balanced and stable. Therefore is mostly ignored on the large and does not affect their emotional state in either direction. On the other hand, they hold much more attention towards negative energy. Also upon interaction to other individuals, they almost entirely able to ignore positive energies in order to detect the negative with high precision. It is generally for sake of avoidance. In some cases the evolution and the environmental sensitivity is so advanced, the empath can detect people's dark side or hidden intention or characteristics without physically interact with others. It can be a photo of the person, or just a chat through dedicated apps or platforms. I did test both scenario myself, involving complete strangers with the result of a success rate of average 9 out of 10 cases, with high precision. The processing of this environmental information flows on multiple channels in the same time. Empath able to sense content or intention of the person even they express themselves otherwise. The general public view of the empath, whom help others, also often put others' needs above their own. Selfless in nature and givers. This is not entirely the truth. The root of this question is much deeper and complex. Just as in case of narcissistic personality disorder, the spectrum of the empathic individuals varies and determine the core traits. The less advanced empaths, for example codependent or people pleaser, or those whom emphatic traits still strong but less evolved in concern of the self-esteem, has high self-criticism and low self-core valuation. This type of empath are the ones who seeking order, and most of the time act from instinct of high vulnerability. The self-defense mechanism is deep-rooted and these empaths does not act upon environmental inputs, but because of the strong instincts, they take action upon observation. This way, they try to eliminate any potential threat against their emotional instability in order to reduce environmental stress. They appear nice and extremely genuine. They do not make distinction between individuals, they does the seemingly selfless act towards almost everyone purely from self-defense. They can be advanced in terms of sensitivity, but the core identity weak in regards to self-esteem and self-valuation. Every empath has narcissistic traits regardless of the strength of the emphatic spectrum. The ones with high self-critical core rarely act outward. If experienced any type of conflict or negative intentions, they mostly turn inward and try to avoid the confrontation on all cost. That is because the processing of such situations overtake the rational analysis and the cognitive functioning highly reduced due the chemical processes more dominant. Therefore they isolate or try to isolate themselves from further interaction or from the source of stress. Essentially it's buying time for self-recovery from injury. They will withdraw, or fall into self-abandonment, and takes reasonable amount of time to gain control over this state. They show no vulnerability, due high level of shame attached to the stress also because the cognitive functions entirely reserved for the recovery process. Further on the spectrum, the narcissistic traits get stronger and more dominant upon conflict. These type of individuals try to avoid the conflict as well, however their capacity to process internally is more limited. Those are the ones whom lash out in confrontation, then immediately pull back to self-abandonment or respond in passive-aggressive form. That is because the deep-rooted shame in the core identity strongly dominant. After certain amount of time of processing and the emotional state regain reasonable amount of balance, they take a blame of their outward act, even they were the reasonable ones in the confrontation or experienced unfair treatment. After recovering from the trauma, they put stop on their own abandonment, as this self-punishment controlled or associated with certain time frame. Therefore, the length of the self-isolation or abandonment entirely depend on the empath's own level of judgment and criticism towards the self, but nothing else. They can keep hold on this state, even the other parties try to pull them out from this period of isolation. This type the ones act immature, and unpredictable upon stressful situations. Finally, further on the spectrum are the ones become superior in the nature. This type of empaths highly experienced, and professionally handle conflict of any type. The core traits strengthened over time, and the self-valuation and self-critical system turned into moral code based on very high cognitive functioning linked to the high sensitivity, results in correct distinction between their involvement or participation in confrontation. This constantly strengthened throughout the life, exactly the same way as the narcissistic personality in some cases tend to moving towards the spectrum of sociopath or psychopath. However, for the empath is an evolution towards fixation, while as for the sociopath or psychopath is exclusively the evolution in the level of cognitive functioning. This is a very important difference, as it explains why one experiencing positive change in their ego structure, while the other tend to fall even further on the scale. A good example for this process is the malignant narcissist. They are on the very edge of the spectrum in terms of their evolution of cognitive functioning. It depends on their age, and experienced by mostly involved in struggling situations throughout the life, but in majority not directly associated particularly to individuals, but to the society at large. Consequently, they are antisocial in general, which reinforce their evolution into a much covered form of narcissism later on, and stimulate the cognitive functioning significantly. Malignant narcissists living in constant frustration under the impact of general environmental factors, this causes continuous level of survival. They express covert manipulative tactics and as well overt narcissistic traits upon interactions, especially in relationships. Just as the life a constant struggle for survival, their relationship shows repetitive patterns one after the other with same dysfunction, and relative short time frames. Due to this ongoing experiences, and the development of cognitive functioning slowly transform into almost fully dominating covert characteristics. Sociopaths and psychopaths are completely aware of the behavior and fully conscious of the decisions. Sociopaths are the most cooperative, as they very determined on the long-term goals. Psychopaths very much identical in behavior, while their sadistic tendency makes them socially dangerous and the high level of distortion in reference to social norms. Still, the malignant narcissist can be identified as the most dangerous type as they totally unpredictable, and highly unstable, carrying the core traits of the entire spectrum. While sociopath and psychopaths can compromise and fit into social environment without any problems, and doing so able to remain undetected, the covert, the overt, and the entire spectrum up to the malignant narcissists incapable to do so. As for the highly advanced empath, as well become covert over time. They can become highly judgmental with the rising urge to fix others, which trigger numerous conflicts in the relationships. The ones capable to rationally analyze their overconfident tendencies and false sense of superiority, becomes rather extremely selective just as in interactions, as well in relationships. This type of empaths has no codependency or any type of self-valuation issues, because soon enough in the young age gained enough understanding over their own vulnerability. This lead them to early independence in life, cutting ties with family in certain degree or even entirely. This type of empaths are quiet, reserved, and neither very social, nor antisocial. Emotionally very strong, as they develop very high threshold against stress. Fearless, and in case of crisis remains very organized, calm, and effective. However, the narcissistic traits as well very strong. Highly advanced empaths are master manipulators. They do not reinforce superiority by conscious choice, instead they support peace and compassion, however are as well able to control situations based on deep psychological basis, successfully. In relationship, the narcissistic and empathic individuals will interact and correspond according to the dominating core characteristics and the level of their evolution. We'll discuss this dynamics in the forthcoming materials. Thanks for watching.